Welcome to the Books and Beer Book Club, coming to you from Cercis Brewing Company in Columbus, Wisconsin. We're a different kind of book club, only reading books by authors who can visit us in person or via Zoom for the discussion. We've been going strong since 2015, meeting nearly every month. We're now making these fun and informative discussions available to you on video. I'm your host, Valerie Beal. I'm an author myself, and I enjoy interviewing our guest authors and facilitating the questions from our readers both in person and on Zoom. We hope you enjoy this replay. To join us live, please check out our schedule on our Facebook page at Books and Beer Columbus.
Welcome everybody, and welcome to Louise, and thank you for coming over. I've known Louise now for, oh gosh, a couple of years, right? So, Kira Henschel from Henschel House Publishing, I guess referred me to you. I've been doing a little marketing, for Louise book marketing, which is what I do for other authors, in my spare time. Online. Good stuff, and you're like my star client. Oh, did you know that? No, I do, I talk about Louise. I say things like, she's so tech savvy. No, seriously, she says she's not. But you like send me screenshots of things like Amazon ads or like Facebook ads. I'm like, is this doing what it's supposed to be doing? I get a screenshot that's actually texted me, and I'm like, you win the client like award. So if we're giving out awards, you win the client award. Oh, I have so many questions. But the initial one I wanted to talk to you about was, as you were starting to gather this information, I'm just curious, like you're keeping notes and you're trying to pull it all together and get a linear, story kind of where your dad was and when. When did you think you had enough information that this was for a book, like that this could be a book?
I think it probably happened when I realized I was gonna start to forget it. And I had to have it down in some written form or it could be lost. Because there were so many little pieces that fit together. And when I first started, I didn't know that would be the case. Because I thought I would probably write about, I even thought like 10 pages. And I would try to put my dad's few comments in chronological order according to this little book. And I thought, how hard can it be? This book is only 50 pages and some of the pages have photos and a map, so I thought that can't be that hard, but it was really hard. These books are written kind of with pride and not really with realism. And my dad wouldn't go toward the pride thing and actually didn't tell me that much. And they would also use too many different numbers, like there's the 35th division made up of the 134th, the 137th, and the 320th. And when I first started, I didn't know what any of those meant. And I would look at it and go, just tell me what my dad did, don't tell me about these other groups. And I thought I'd do like 10 pages and then I would put it on email and send it out to relatives. Like my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my first cousins, and then it would kind of disseminate from there. But it just kept going and going, and it became in a way more interesting with every part of it that I learned. And I got to be very good. My kids said I was a very good creeper. And that is a little savvy. I got good at that, but I started this in 2002. And in 2002, it was really easier to be a good creeper because everybody had landlines and they didn't blur out addresses. And I don't know exactly, I suppose if I looked in my notes, I would know. But when I first started, there was a Social Security death index. And they would list the person's name, what county they died in, when they were born, what their Social Security number was, and all of that, but I didn't know what to do with, I didn't know what to illegally do with the Social Security. I just knew, I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. But the Social Security index, the advantage of that is I would know whether I was looking for the veteran or their family.
Oh, right.
And that was helpful.
Yes.
So but basically I decided it had to be a book because it got too complicated. I think that's basically it.
Okay, so early on, if you've got the book in front of you, page 10 has the way, the divisions of the military work. I absolutely did that. I didn't know what I was doing with all the numbers. I was like, okay, wait, I think I can picture this now. Like I needed a map of this. with a
I
division,
did too.
yeah, so the division being bigger than a regiment, then a battalion, then a company, and then the platoon.
The neighbor kid did that for me.
Oh, well,
Thank you, John.
yeah, but I mean, like, this is essential. This is essential for knowing your way through, because they do throw a lot of numbers around.
And there was someone, I did a podcast with somebody, Ray Harris Jr., history of World War II. And he said he thought my book was like, for someone who knows nothing, it's a good way to start to understand military terms.
He meant it as a compliment.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes, yeah.
I didn't know if he was like kind of
No,
dug up or
no, no.
something.
He said I actually recommend it to anybody that has, because he's doing a podcast with people that are know more.
Right, right.
He also said to me, this book pulled on heartstrings I didn't know I had.
Oh, that's
That's
really nice. Yeah. 2002 is when you started.
Yeah.
Your dad started to talk more about wartime things after your mom died, or what?
Right, and I think that's kind of common,
Yeah,
after they
yeah.
lose their primary support and was there for them during the war. It's kind of common that a few things come out, but really what happened is we had a family friend who came to the farm after my mom died, and he had been living out in Silver Spring, Maryland, maybe, and went to visit his family in Chicago, and then came up to the farm and mom died. And when he was there, he came to extend his sympathy, and we went through my dad's army trunk. And there was a discharge paper that had the number 604 on it, and he was like, that's machine gunning. And we hadn't known that because my dad had only told us he was a barber, a chauffeur, and a translator. And then that day when he was there, we were like, oh, machine gunner. But that was the painful part. And that's what he didn't want to ever talk about. So the other parts, we knew a little bit about that.
So you're gradually gathering this information, and then you're trying to figure out other things online,
Yes.
and then you're reaching out to all kinds of people. I mean, you talk to so many people,
Uh-huh.
and you're like looking at photos and trying to figure out who's who.
I don't
and-
mean to point people out, but her dad's in the book. Her dad is Don May. And Patty, right? Patty. Okay,
Yes.
and I could call him whenever I wanted, and I guess he used this line on other people. But his sight was really weak and he would love talking on the phone. And I called him once and he said, oh, this is just great. I just used the restroom and I'm good for 3 hours.
Yeah, he loved her calls. He just loved them. He would call me, I think, right after to let me know everything they talked about. It meant so much to him.
Yes, we recognize the name from the story. He came up a lot.
Yes, he
in the
did.
story. Yes. Yes.
He was important. He was important because he understood my dad and he could kind of get little tidbits out. Or he could tell me something, even if my dad didn't, he could tell me things.
So you start to write this, and when did you have like kind of a finished manuscript? I mean, I'm sure it went through so many stages.
He goes through so many
Right.
stages.
So I forget what year was it, 2020?
Not
2019?
2019, November 1st,
Okay.
2019. Yep. And I think the beginning of 2019, I did an Audible,
Okay.
and that's a whole experience too.
Did you do the voice of it?
Yes.
You read it?
I
Wow.
read it.
It's a lot of work.
And
That's a lot of
so
work. Yeah.
the person who helped me, his name was truly Chris Kringle. His dad thought that would be funny. But I'd go to his house and he had a closet and I'd sit in the closet with baffles, to
Yeah.
absorb sound.
Yeah.
And then Chris was sitting out at controls and then he'd say, okay, take a drink or do that again, or okay, maybe we should quit today. He only really did that once, where he said, that's just not working. And I would say things like, it doesn't seem that difficult to say comradeship. Comradeship. But if you're saying it within a sentence, it went to comrade shit. And it went to comrade Schmidt. Because I've been raised with a lot of Schmidts. And I had trouble, and I think he finally just had me say it and he spliced it in because I was struggling so much.
No, and then the pressure's on. So once you start to make that mistake, then it gets in
Oh,
your
yeah,
head and
yeah.
it's just, yeah.
And there was within the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans were infiltrating our lines and they were wearing our uniforms and speaking perfect English. So they would give a password every day at noon. So that if somebody was going through a checkpoint, you had to know the password. And sometimes there were people who stammered or stuttered. They actually were killed because they thought they were Germans that were having trouble. And so one day we were talking and like I said, I'm in a little closet and I'm talking to him always way. And I said, well, at least I know that if I stammer and stutter, you won't kill me. And he was real quiet and he goes, not yet.
Is this like sound engineer humor? Like, what is that?
Not yet.
Did you not got into that chapter yet? Were you at that chapter?
We never had done it. You know,
So
he was kind and honest,
this, I mean, obviously started as a labor of love, you know, to get this down on paper for family.
Well, one of the reasons it started is I was at a 50th birthday party and somebody said, Louise, what are you doing? And I said, I'm researching World War II and what my dad did in it, and he's pained by it all. And the hostess of the party, who has not read the book, you see it irritates me a little bit. She said, oh, I have a theory about that. Some can take it and some can't. And that was kind of a motivation. Yeah, isn't that old? That's not good to say to anybody for any situation where if you're pained by it, you just go, oh, you just can't take it. But that was something where I had to figure out what he did because I knew the guy and I knew if he was pained by it. He was pretty strong and he wasn't a whiner or complainer. And if he said something was a problem or you knew it was a problem, it was. So I had to figure out what it was that he had done.
Right. Your initial like promo line is we almost didn't know.
Right.
And he had told you different things about what he'd done.
But more like barbering.
Right, right. Well, and you knew he spoke, you know, German and would have been able to be a translator. That all made sense to you, that that would have worked out. At what point did he tell you that, or did you learn that from looking at his service records or?
Well, I knew some of this because at his 80th birthday, I have this thing, I taught. So I have this thing where I had maybe 20 questions about my dad at his 80th birthday party. And I said in the Army, he served as a barber, a chauffeur, and a translator, because I knew that when he was 80. And he passed away at 89, and this started to develop at 83. Okay. And I had him go through the whole list and verify it. He looked at the first one, and then he was like, yeah, that's right. But there was a pause and a hesitation. And I think it was like, it was barber, chauffeur, translator, all of them. And there really wasn't room for another thing. And he maybe didn't want to tell us yet. But he did stop and hesitate because he knew it wasn't complete, right? But I did know that when he was 80. I knew those three things.
I mean, when you think about, was it his unit that had the 400%?
The right
casualty, yeah, the casualty rate. And it took me, it just took me a minute to understand how it can be more than 100. And I'm like, oh, well,
I had a math.
Did you?
Who said it can't be over 100? I said, oh, yes, it can. You just replace them 4 times.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they all died. It just meant they were injured. You had to replace that position. With the percentage?
So
400%.
400%
for the rifleman.
Like what injury or casualty rate was it?
And I think Albert Simon loosely related to him.
Mm-hmm.
Albert Simon was a rifleman, I think. Dad was machine gunner, and they're either embedded with the riflemen or right behind them. And Robert Phillips, who I call my 94-year-old boyfriend in Georgia, he told me he thought it was better for them to be behind the riflemen because if the riflemen couldn't move, if machine guns are right in there, they couldn't stand either. But if they were behind, maybe they could shoot over the heads of the riflemen.
And then keep some forward progress.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
It did. I would never have known it, but Robert said, and he was with my dad.
Well, and we wouldn't, these are things having never been in a battle like that. I mean, we wouldn't know what the options were, or how it would have worked. Interesting. So you got bits and pieces from your dad, and then you filled in where you could. So when you got some particularly interesting pieces that you wanted to hopefully confirm with him, you would bring him, to him on a visit, or like was he Did he ever really?
But he didn't confirm too much.
No.
At the very beginning, I read a little bit of Normandy or northern France, and he just said that's enough for today.
And that was the end of it.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah.
You could tell. I also had a sight major, which I think is just enough to make you dangerous. But I could tell when it was like pushing on it, when there was some pain, although I missed that once too,
Yeah.
toward the end.
That makes sense, though. I mean, and then we've had a number of different stories here, like we read a book called Tailspin. And that was a history teacher from Viroqua interviewing a veteran from Viroqua.
Who fell out of a plane.
Yeah, you've read that, yeah?
I know
Yeah.
about it.
Okay, so he was in the tail of the sheared off tail. He was a tail gunner, veteran would stay. We're done, like when it got bad, you know, like the discussion
This is
went so
pushing-
far and now we're done today. Yeah, because he was a POW for a long time. It's just, yeah, you got, I mean, what are you gonna do? The boundaries are there because it's just too painful, so.
I have a picture of Joe Demler speaking of power, prisoners of war. It's a picture of Joe Demler. Do you know who that is? The most photographed prisoner of war in World War II.
Oh, you
It was
have,
in Time magazine.
yeah, you have that picture in your slides.
Yeah.
Should we go, do you want to go to that?
Well, or we'll come upon it later,
Okay.
but he was from Fort Washington. And when I saw in a Ozaki County book that he had served with the 35th, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I wrote him a letter and I said, if he wanted to talk to me, I would come up there. If he didn't want to talk to me, that was perfectly fine. And he called me back and he said, sorry, I haven't responded. We were getting the carpeting. And I went up and I spoke with him. And what I found out, and I went to, see, this is all in the book, but there was a woman whose mother was at the Good Samaritan Center in Lodi. And she asked someone, she was from the US Embassy in Luxembourg, and she asked somebody at the nursing home, is there anyone here who has done who did the Battle of the Bulge? And they said, well, check Alfred down there. So we went over and visited her, and she took us around and she showed us where Joe Demler had been captured. And about 3 months later, I found out one line in one book, it said the 1st Battalion of D Company of the 320th staff was substituted in for all of those who had been captured. So he had
So
to go in.
he was like one wave back from
Yes,
where this guy was
yes, and then
captured.
they put him in and said, okay, now you go finish what was happening.
Right.
So.
Are there some questions?
Where was your dad born?
Martinsville.
So he was born in Wisconsin and his parents immigrated, that's how he knew of German or?
Martinsville is so heavy duty German, or it was.
Yeah.
It was so heavy duty German, everyone spoke German. And then until he went to school. And then I suppose the nuns taught him English. But his parents, I think his parents were born here and I should know that, but I think they were.
Probably.
Yeah, grandparents.
My dad was a good friend of your dad's, and the grandparents made, not the parents, the parents.
Right,
But they didn't learn English until they went to school.
that's why I could never say THs too, because if you learn, there's certain sounds
Yeah.
that if you don't learn them by a certain age, your brain says, oh, you don't need those. So the THs that are my dad's,
Actually interviewed my grandmother, dad's sister,
my aunt.
yes, for my master's degree. And part of it, I asked, it was a biographical one. And I asked her when she stopped knowing German, and she said when she went to kindergarten, she was teased because it was during
Oh,
World War I.
she was teased during, it was World War I. Okay.
So she stopped speaking German.
Lori, did you catch that?
I did, thank you.
Right.
But now,
Yeah, that's
when they
interesting.
say 2 3 in Manitowoc.
Two tree,
Two tree.
one tree.
But it is funny though, that would have been his first language. He spoke German at home. Great, so.
And he hung on to it. He hung on to the ability to speak German. My mom could read it. My dad wanted to hear it, wanted to speak it, but your mom didn't.
I asked her to teach me something in German, and my husband's grandmother is German. They never, she's from Los Angeles. And I asked them both to teach me a phrase in German, and they taught me "Du bist verrückt," which means you're a crazy man.
That's useful.
That was it.
The whole thing with my father and that he didn't speak is why I called it the quiet mystery. Yeah, it just wasn't out there. I had to find it.
He's like stoic and I mean, and he came home and he, farmed. Right? And
And then about, I should know this, 9 months and 11 days, get another child.
But there were so many men who did not get to see the babies that were born,
Right.
so they came home to 1.5-year-olds, and never saw the baby phase, in person anyway, even if things caught up. And there was a letter that took forever to get to him. And that actually helped you kind of unravel
Yes.
some stuff.
It's really good that my parents didn't get rid of things.
Yeah.
And one of the Hoyle cousins said to me, oh, we would have been in that trunk playing with all that stuff, but we never did. And what she thought was amazing that we still had, and I'll just talk about because
Oh, that's interesting.
K-rations, you have one, wow, then I have more, and she said, oh, we would have played with those.
So let me see. So that's all sealed up. So
Yeah, but pretty well. It's got graham crackers and I think bullion powder.
okay. So how hard are those graham crackers? Are they disintegrating?
They're not. But I was at a book event outside and, we're at a
Let me
book
hold it up for
event,
Lori.
you have
Can you see it, Lori?
to try to get people to come to you.
That's something.
So there were some 12-year-old boys walking by and I said at that time, do you want some 77-year-old crackers? And they're like, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, I just shouldn't make this to you. But there's,
Like a dare.
and yeah, no. It's a little boring what I was saying. Okay, and there's toilet paper here from Scott Paper Company. And I think there was room for 4 cigarettes. So even if you didn't smoke, you could trade cigarettes for something like a better dinner. So this was in half of it. And then the other half would be kind of like a can of hash or something. Certain things are better than others. And this was inside another container. And this is coated in wax, so we keep the food dry and it could be burned. To start a fire started.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So
Wow, the fact that you have that, that's crazy.
And there was someone. Okay, I had to learn how to ask questions of my dad. You can't just say, well, what was it like? That's too
Yeah.
broad. You have to get
Yeah.
specific. It has to show you did something. You have to have something more objective. So one time I asked him, how do you feel about fruit cocktail? Because I had read during the week that there was a man who said, I didn't eat it again after the war. I was so sick of it. I thought, okay, that's a good question. How do you feel about fruit cocktail? It's okay. And I was like, okay, that ain't both far. And I should have been able to back that up a little bit, but it was early.
Yeah.
And then I had another 3.5 hours. Because that's kind of what I spent. I drove from Cedarburg to Lodi. That's about almost 2 hours,
Right.
2 hours home. But my mathematical formula is that you stay on site as long as your travel time.
Ah, there you go.
So
The 6 hour.
it's kind
Yeah.
of true.
Yeah.
So, otherwise it seems too short.
So did he tell you the story about the oranges and the chocolate in Metz with the bathhouse?
that we knew
You
that.
always knew that.
We always knew
Is it
that.
because of the ring? Is it because of that the story was told, do you think?
There's certain things that I just think I was born with, but I knew he hated war. And I feel
Yeah.
I was just born with that. I mean, that didn't come from me verbally.
Right.
So I mean, like.
So
okay,
did everybody read the part? I mean, you go ahead and tell the story, so.
Okay, so this ring says in French, be well worn off, but it says in French, more than yesterday, less than tomorrow. And my dad and his friend Ben Lane from Houstontown, Pennsylvania. Freed, found him, easy, small town, and he never moved. The two of them knew the manager of the bathhouse, so they went to Metz, France, right before the Battle of the Bulge to have a shower in the bathhouse where everybody took showers. And the manager admitted that he had nothing to give to his kids for Christmas. So my dad and Ben Lane said, and there's some gum here too. It was like fruit chocolate, maybe were the Christmas rations.
Mhm.
And so they they gave their fruit and chocolate to that man. And they went to his house Christmas Eve, I think. And I had to leave real quickly so they wouldn't be seen. The man had tears in his eyes. He said, I'll see you after the battle, because they knew there was a major battle going on up north. So I knew my dad had done that. But that gets more involved too, because I decided to find that family. But anyway, but before that,
Yeah.
which was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
that I could find the family. But when I said something to Dad to kind of compliment him on doing that, he said of his friend Ben, well, it was more his idea than mine. And I think he would have liked his chocolate. Probably held some resentment. But that's also why I knew he wouldn't exaggerate anything. Because he could have run with that and said,
Sure,
and he didn't.
sure. How did you find them? Did you know their last name?
No.
I'm very
No,
curious.
Okay, I found
I'm
them.
nosy.
I found them because Ben Lane, I did talk to him on the phone. And he told me that he was the manager of the bathhouse. And then my dad mentioned that he had come to the United States to swim. And I thought in 44, how many people would come from France to swim? And he was, there were international competitions, I suppose. But you bring a ship over,
Yeah.
it'd be a major thing.
Right, right.
And so when I was trying to find something positive about the war, just something to ease the pain of it all,
Mhm.
I thought, I'm gonna try to find that family. So I went to the Swimmers Hall of Fame. It was mostly the swimming part that made me go for it. I went to the Swimmers Hall of Fame in Florida. And they said, we don't have those records, but we'll give you the French Swimmers Hall of Fame. And when I got to a person they were like, yeah, okay, we're on this. We're gonna send this up to the elders in Lorraine. And within 8 days, it came back to me and the guy said, I think we found our man. And they had an address. Wow. And so I wrote a letter. I had to have it translated to French,
Mhm.
which all this takes time.
Right, of course, yeah.
Can do it.
Yeah.
Who's willing to do it. And it took about, several months before I got a reply. And I remember opening it up, being really excited, looking at it on the counter and being a little weepy. But I couldn't read it because it was in French. But there were dates and I could see the name Ben in Vietnam in certain years.
Okay.
So I knew it was a connection, but then I had to have it translated again. And
So-
then that was around Thanksgiving time. I told a sister-in-law the story and she goes, well, you should give the veterans fruit and chocolate. It was Christmas. And so I did. And I called Houstontown, Pennsylvania, their little store, which I can't remember right now. And I said, do you know Ben Lane? And they go, yep. And I said, will you send them fruit and chocolate? I told them the story. I think they sent it before I even sent them a check.
Yeah.
They just did it.
It's like small
And then-
town nice.
And then in Lodi, somebody that my dad delivered it from Lodi Piggly Wiggly. And it was written up in the Madison newspaper by George, somebody, George.
Hesselberg, probably.
Yeah.
That's definitely a George Hesselberg style
Yeah.
story, isn't it? Yeah.
So he wrote that.
So did you ever
And
talk about that?
just thinking about that. He had a brother, Edward, a sister Celia. Also, I feel like one of the kids, they would come and visit my dad. They would come and visit my dad. And they were there on the day he had gotten that basket of fruit and chocolate. And they said, yeah, we wondered about that, but we really didn't ask. And he didn't say a word. They didn't say a word. Well,
You didn't explain it.
no.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, no, it's your show.
No.
Like, I'm interrupting. So did you ever meet them? You never went to Mets?
No.
Okay, I was just curious.
Mets is bigger than I expected. So in truth, we went past it.
Yeah.
We went past it. It was bigger than I expected. And what else about that? It would have been tough to find. And it wasn't finding the man, it was finding his kids.
Right.
Said, I remember it.
Mhm. I know, it's just a nice story.
Oh, it's a very nice story.
And you're right, in the middle of all the things that you were writing about, to have
Oh,
something
yeah.
like that.
And
like,
and to say it's a good thing, Dad.
Yeah.
I had a niece that was sitting right there. And she was a PA at Mayo Clinic like 2 years ago. And somebody came in that was a World War II vet, and because she had read the book and she knew her grandfather, she tried to broach that subject. And that man said, I looked down from it, it's all I wanted to do, all I want to do is forget. Yeah, and my dad said, I tried not to remember, it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Slightly different, but it basically is, it's in me and it's not in way. Right, and then my dad had just keep it trapped, that's all. Okay, so at the very beginning, when I started researching, D-Day was not part of anything I was interested in because I knew this, and I knew this so well. And
Can you see that, Lori?
yes. Oh, this is the book of the 320th Regiment, which was my dad's group. And I knew this so well, and it did not involve D-Day. They landed in France in July. There's so many little details to all of this.
I found a PDF of that online.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Interesting.
You can't see the photos, but
Okay.
you can see the words.
And we had a couple of them and we donated one. It had autographs in the back. We donated that to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. So my dad has a.
Where did that come from? Like who composed that? Like a person?
They got on the, yeah, I think it even puts a date in it. Published in Hamlin, and Germany on D-Day plus 365. June 6, 1945.
Am I in the way?
Public Relations Office. Public Relations Office.
Did your dad know that you were compiling this information for a book?
Yeah, he knew I was up to something. Very close to the end of his life, was quite close. I was leaving one day, you know, you have a system. I didn't go for every Saturday for 5.5 years because I have a sister in New Mexico. She was visiting and Dad was busy. I didn't go. If it was a holiday and other people around, I didn't go, but I went for like 80% of them. And, you know, there's a routine, you know, I think I'd kiss him on the forehead, say, bye, Dad, see you next week. And I'd walk out the door and he'd say goodbye. That's the little routine, same thing.
Did you ever talk about how much money you were making a week or a month? What kind of income you were getting?
I feel like you said
I
it
think
somewhere in the
I
book, but now I
feel
don't
like
remember where that was.
I know, I'm getting the light.
I heard it was like 12 cents an hour.
Yeah, that sounds a little heavy. Even when he got out, they got a certain payment when they got out. It wasn't too much, but then it was some years ago, 80 years ago,
Yeah,
12 cents an hour.
I'm just wondering what kind of take home pay.
Well, they used to, there's a letter in there from someone saying how someone sold one when he was making cards or whatever. And
Like what their bets were?
yeah.
It wasn't much.
I mean, that's too
no.
much.
Yeah, I know. Military really good.
And then my parents were married, so I suppose he would kind of send it over. One time I was leaving his room on a Saturday, I kissed him, say, bye, Dad, see you next week. And as I was crossing the threshold of the door, turning left to leave, he waited till I got to the threshold and he said, good luck. And at first I was like, it's, you know, my dad, you know, that's, I was just like, what does that mean? But I think it meant, I know you're doing something, whatever it is that you want, I will be it. And he died several months later. You know, they kind of know. They kind of know when they're gonna. And I think, I don't know how that was related, but you know, I showed him a picture of the Higgins boat. It's another reason I thought that was an object, you know, like, how do you feel about fruit cocktail? You show me Higgins boat, and maybe you could say something.
So the Higgins boats were the landing ones that came with the
So that you could land on a beach.
Right.
Right. Come down on a beach and you could run off. And I showed it to him, and he said, "Where'd you get that?" And then I set up the computer and I asked him maybe a couple of questions, and it flipped it into a flashback.
did it.
And then his jaw came out and he was real furrowed and he was weeping. And he said, it happened, it's over. And I decided right then I was done. But again, he died in 2007, and that was maybe in March, right? Something like that. And then I knew that day, I was like, no. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry, Dad. I said, are you having images? And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to happen. I didn't know what to happen, but I knew I was not going to ask anything else.
if somebody was going to do the same thing for one of their relatives, would it have been any easier to first try to fix the psyche and say, it's okay, and talk about this? It's
You know what, that's what I would have thought originally.
Psychologically, that like
Yeah, like if you could heal that somehow and then maybe they could talk. Well, there was, okay, so Robert Phillips, 94-year-old boyfriend in Georgia, he said he went to about 20 reunions and he got better. He did say that. And he would be at a reunion and there'd be other people that understood him, understood what they had done. And actually, they say European soldiers were better supported than Americans because the European civilians saw what had happened. They saw it. They were
that
part
makes
of it.
sense,
They-
doesn't it?
You know, and so they were much better supported than Americans were, where you come back and there would be naive comments.
Right.
And one of them was, he got the French Legion of Honor. And I could go on for so long. He got the French Legion of Honor in 2006, November. So when everybody was getting it now, I was, you know, on D-Day, I was like, oh, why did they have that earlier? So I suspect, to be honest, that some of those weren't in the hardcore part of it. And when that first started, it started 60 years after the war. You had to be alive. So all the guys that died on the beaches,
Never were
They don't-
eligible. Yeah.
they don't get it. And so it's difficult to get, and yet there's in certain ways you can get it. My dad was still alive 60 years after the war. I nominated him, who would never have done it himself, and I knew about it because I was researching. And then he had to have done something significant.
Mhm.
I nominated 3 guys. Boyfriend in Georgia. It wasn't me, but I talked to one, like Don McCool. And I nominated Robert, my dad, and Charles Abernathy from Colorado. And Charles Abernathy did not get it. And I have no idea why, because he was in the same division. I would have to look in my file on him to know if he was in the same regiment. He would have terrible nightmares all through his life. He went to, somebody took him to one of the movies, World War II movies, and he looked out.
Yeah.
And it was a really bad scene. They had to get him out, and he fell apart. I mean, and he got an honorable discharge. I think I got his discharge papers, and he was refused. But at the beginning, it was competitive. You know, they only gave like 100.
Those 3 people, like all the ones that you nominated, did you tell them you were going to nominate them?
Yeah, Robert told me he didn't want to be nominated because maybe if you were a younger man. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, you're not going to get younger. You know, so I just did it. And he was okay with it when it was done. And he could have refused. In fact, no, actually what he did, he tore up the paper. And then his wife was deceased. And a family friends told him, Robert, you should be ashamed of yourself. So then he taped it back together. It was a paper saying he had been awarded the medal.
Right.
And then he did, he received it down in Georgia with, I think, 4 other guys. And I think it was good for him and his family.
Well, I mean, it was the reticence because, well, they did things that we would all consider heroic because, you know, courageous, whatever.
Right, but they all did their
didn't,
part.
but
Yes.
they didn't want to be recognized because of how horrible, like really how horrible
Right.
it was.
And that some people didn't get it.
Yeah,
But I think in the end,
it was tricky.
and so, and I do know this from an obituary, and it's the father of a friend of mine, and he got the French Legion of Honor much later, like last 4 years maybe. And he got his for exemplary behavior in a band. And I was like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he was. That's what he did in France. He was in a band. And I don't think that qualifies. If Charles Abernathy didn't get one, a band member should not get it. But that's just me.
So I have another question. When I was reading the book, it was interesting, or this is what I remember.
how they came and knocked on the doors to figure out who would go.
Yes, we should talk about that.
That was so eerie kind of to me. I'm a family, there's 10 kids. And I kind of wish your grandma was here to tell us her perspective of that, because she was the oldest in the family, but she would have known.
She would have totally, she remembered that, I'm sure. Did she talk about it?
I have to listen to the, I have it on cassette that went to digital file and I need to listen to it again.
I didn't see if she covered that or
We
not.
actually didn't know that. We didn't know that until one of Edward's granddaughters wrote it for history class in Wanakee High School. Wow. But what happened is that like a government official went to my grandfather on the farm in Martinsville, corner of Martinsville Road and Puget or whatever, and said, okay, your oldest son is married on a farm. Farms were deferments on a farm and with a child. Okay, that's okay. You have 2 sons here, and one can stay and help you, and the other one has to go to work. And they wanted him to decide. And my grandfather said, I can't decide that. And my dad was, I think, 22 months older, and he was protecting his brother. So he said, I'll go. And he never did seem to hold any resentment or for that. He didn't, because I said something to him, thinking that try to open a door for like him to say something now and that. And he said, if I didn't go, Eddie would have to go, and I didn't want that. Didn't want that. So he kind of.
Still amazing then, right? I mean, like, to volunteer.
It comes to turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
He decided, he chose, and he took what it was. When he came home, his brother, Edward in Wanakee, with an excavating company, would have given him a job, but I think he knew he needed to be alone and farm. He needed to be his own boss.
Yeah.
After you come out of the military, you're not real keen on anyone to live in I think he knew he just needed, you know. Is that true?
Yeah.
Your wife, Joyce,
Do you agree?
Still the same.
We have a number of people who've been into this here. So,
yeah.
the other thing that I was just so intrigued by, and I know that you were never able to completely prove it, but you're like, I don't know what percentage of the way there, is this D-Day +1, and which doesn't match the book for that
Because they
division.
This was my major mistake. I thought my dad trained with this group, went to Europe with this group, served with this group, and came home with this group. I mean, I was always researching, but I probably would have been able, if I had gone to the farm, but I was always going to the nursing home, and maybe would have figured that out sooner. But what happened is he trained with the 44th, got pulled out of the 44th away from his friends, and he went up to Europe with Albert Simon, somebody else from Martinsville area. I don't know who he was with in June of 44, like when D-Day was happening. Then he served with this group because he had over 85 points. They tried to get him home sooner, because if you had 85 points, you should be able to go home. He had 95, so they put him in the 63rd. He came home at the 63rd because they thought that group would get him faster. It didn't work, but I actually think that was okay too, because I think it gave him more time to deprogram. To kind of, he had like another month maybe or something to kind of.
Before he was on a ship.
Yes.
For home. So you're making the assumption that he's with this group the whole time, which means he landed in Europe or he landed in France somewhere around July, 7 or 8 or something like that. 11. So like a good month after.
Yeah, I have the morning papers of the day he went in, so that's confirmed. What happened is he got that French Legion of Honor, and they wanted us to go to Chicago, and I said, yeah, we can't do that. That's too big of a thing for him. He was relatively healthy, but to get down from Lodi to Chicago, then have a big ceremony, then come back.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's like that's too much for him. So they sent somebody up to Lodi from the French consulate in Chicago. We couldn't have the top person. And when they said they were going to have an American give him the medal, and I said, I thought about that for like half hour, and I was like, I can't have that. And I said it can be a custodian, but it's,
Gotta be somebody's French.
we need the accent. And he won't care, but he knows Americans don't know. And a French person, he would be more inclined, but even when there was a young man who was very appreciative, he also knew that guy didn't know. Exactly.
Wasn't old enough to
Wasn't
know. Yeah.
But anyway, on that day, I'm talking to 100 people. We have a lot of relatives and the Legion, you know, whatever. And there were 2 TV cameras from Madison and the Little Lodi Enterprise. And I read a speech and I said he was not involved in D-Day because I wanted to make sure that was clear. He arrived in July of 44 and his face was totally blank, but he's right here in his wheelchair. I'm holding his hand talking. And then the person from the French consulate said, does he understand? And I said, oh yeah, he just can't walk. He broke a hip. He can't walk, but cognitively he's fine. And when I watched the video, I could see why she asked that question because it was so blank. And for some of these, when there's French Legion of Honors, they're very happy. You know, they're very proud of all of that. He was just blank. Okay, so I remember seeing that and I was like, I gave it my best shot.
Well, yeah, of course.
You know, I gave it my best shot on the Monday after I was drinking Calvados straight out of the bottle. I hardly drank it. I was at the computer and there was just a little bit left and I'm like, I did the best. Let's finish this up and make a book. But then about, I'll say 2 to 3 months later, I was there one day and I asked about a buddy. Doesn't matter. Can't give it right now. Sonia, Sophia, and Anna Marie Brezek. It's a good name because you can look it up easily.
Yeah.
You know, Culture is probably a pretty good name. Like your names aren't that good. Beal might be okay with your last name.
No, Johnson. Not gonna it's like Smith, Brown.
Yeah. But anyway, I asked a question because I had found his nephew and he wanted to know a story about his uncle. And I asked Dad, do you have a story about Eddie Brezek? And he said no. Then he shifted to somebody else. Yeah, I'm just not going to give names. It doesn't matter. It shifted to someone else. And then all of it was like he had to tell me something. And he was just talking like for maybe 5 minutes. I'm not sure. But he kept talking and I was writing down, using his recliner and writing everything down. And then he mentioned dead bodies floating in water. And when I left that day, I thought, okay, that must have been a river crossing because they had 10 river crossings, kind of major ones, you know. And I thought that must be what it was. But then I never even got to this.
No, but we can do that. Do you want to go on from this one? Or do you want to?
Let's just do this real quickly. And then we'll go to, okay, when he said dead bodies floating in water. Okay, we'll go from there later. Okay, this is a map that I have for D-Day. And I just wanted you to see kind of generally where Americans came from. We have a lot more ports and maybe with smaller amounts, but we only went to Utah and Omaha, and that's what we usually hear about. Omaha was really bad. They hadn't cleaned any enemy out of that area because I think we were afraid of hitting some of our own people. But anyway, so this was Canada and British troops landed on Gold Sword, Juno. The Germans expected us to come here at Clay.
Yeah, that's the shortest crossing.
Right, and they just thought that made sense. And then Patton was up here with a cardboard army, like cardboard.
Oh yeah, do you guys all know about that? They set it up. They made it look like, I mean, there wasn't a whole
Post army.
Yeah, it was all cardboard cutouts, and
it would then because it wouldn't work today. But at that time, if a German plane was flying over, you're like, yeah, I hear Patton's down there. And he was, because he was being disciplined for slapping somebody in Africa. There was something he did. He was kind of ruthless. But anyway, some people thought that he fell off too many horses. It's kind of so he was good at what he did, but he also was a little unusual, volatile. Eisenhower was flipped, between being okay and being kind of crazy. And we landed down here, and no one wanted to wait. This is Don May. Don May told me. I was gonna say not friends of Hitler, but he knew that Hitler was so crazy. He was sleeping and nobody wanted to wake him up. No one wanted to wake up Hitler because he was a wild man, a madman, I think he had thought. And if they had been able to wake him up and if he would have been coherent, they could have sent Rommel's tanks down here and they would have gotten on. And your dad said we would have been food for the fish. Yeah. So that was a lot for us, that it was at the right time. Okay, another thing, a lot of times they say the people that landed on D-Day were 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Albert Simon was 38 and my dad was 26. But we think they were both taken out of the groups that they trained in and they were replacements to be thrown on the beaches, kind of. They were both farmers. They both could speak German. They were both strong. Albert was really strong. He was a bigger guy than my dad, but they were strong. They were Germans. Their test scores probably weren't the greatest because they've done great 8th grade.
Well, it's very typical.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to say this is an art project from United Kingdom artists, and they asked for about 500 volunteers to stencil the silhouettes of fallen soldiers. And okay, then go to the next one, and that's
what that looks like when they're all.
It was Project 9,000. So the 9,000 isn't just Americans, and this is only who died, not were just injured, death. And it included the Germans, it included us, it included Canadians, the British, and there were a lot of French civilians that died. They couldn't warn them,
Right.
because then it would go to the Germans.
Right.
And in the Normandy campaign, I think there were 20,000 that died
Oh, not
as we
surprised.
came through.
So if your dad is D-Day +1, he's coming onto this beach in the same way the day before was, except now all these bodies are here, a good number of them. It would not have been removed, right? There was nobody to do that because they're still fighting. And I assume there's like the bluff up above,
Yes.
right? And so they're fighting.
And whatever it was on D-Day, and I tried to figure out what group he might have been with. The closest I can come to is the 2nd Division, because I talked to one of those men, and what his day was like on D-Day +1 is very similar to what my dad's was.
Yeah.
And there was a general out in the channel who thought, he said it's just terrible what's happening here, and that was on D-Day +1. So I think he was looking at my dad going, sure.
Yeah. So this is that article that you were talking about.
Yes, and this is Joe Demler.
Yeah.
This is what, he went down to 70 pounds. So he joined my dad's group in Metz, basically.
Same
That's
guy.
him,
Same guy. Yeah.
And I went up and talked to him. He was a really sweet guy. They named the post office in Port Washington after him. And his neighbor, okay, so this was in Life magazine, and they had told Joe they wouldn't put it in a magazine, but it was too good for war bonds. You know, it was too good of a way to sell war bonds. And Joe's neighbor came over to his parents and they had the magazine and they go, we think this could be Joe. And his parents hadn't recognized him, but the neighbor did. That's what he told me.
I mean, that's such a hardship.
And
I can't even.
every day is a bonus. They have that on the back of the flights that go to Washington, D.C., at least for the Milwaukee area.
Oh,
And that's his comment.
The honor flight.
Yes.
Go out.
honor
Yeah.
flights.
Yes. That makes sense.
So that's Joe Demler.
And then let me know if you want me to go forward or back.
Go back.
Let me know what you want to stop at.
That envelope. So the day that my dad
This
said,
envelope?
yes,
Okay.
the day that my dad said, dead bodies floating in water, I didn't know, I was thinking about it all the way home, and I was going, I don't know what that is. But I remembered I had this envelope that never made sense to me. So on that, I would go on Saturday, Sunday, I didn't do anything. On Monday, I looked at this, and for the first time, I put in what this said, and it says 325 GLDR, I didn't have to say it, and he was in the 320th, and that says 325th. So
Right.
I was like, there's 16 million guys, one digit off is pretty easy to make. So I always thought it was a mistake for the 320th. But that day I put it in and it comes up as a 325th glider attached to the 82nd Airborne. I was just like, how could I miss that? How could I never have checked into that before? And the 82nd Airborne had gliders go in behind the Germans. And they couldn't steer, no brakes, but they were dropping in behind the Germans so that somebody would go there and then the guys go through. And I knew my dad hadn't done that, but there also was an amphibious part, but I never got that to connect quite right either. But anyway, so it's right there on the first, and this envelope came from my grandmother in Lodi, and she sent it to Arkansas where my parents were for Easter. But then in early May, like Easter, I'll say April 15th, I don't know. And shortly after that, they went to the East Coast for my dad to leave. So it missed him in Arkansas. Then they tried to find him, but he's not with his group, or he's not even, he isn't with this yet. He is with the 44th, which is done. And then also here, again, it's 325. Yeah, light infantry again. So I called Dad and I said, "You didn't do D-Day, did you?" And he goes, "No." And that's how helpful it was. And I said, "When did you go?" And he said, "The day after." And I said, with men or women? He said, "Just men." And we didn't say too much. And then I talked about squirrels and birds eating because but I had to. And then I just was so discombobulated for 3 days. I was like, I don't even know what I was talking about.
Right. No, but
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't tell you.
No. And the records in St. Louis burned, like 80% of the records burned in St. Louis in the 70s. So it wasn't like he had complete records. And when I was doing this, sometimes people would say, "Oh, just get his discharge papers." I'm like, I'm so far beyond discharge papers.
That's not going to help you. That isn't going to help you.
But anyway, there's like 10, and here's a replacement depot, which means you take somebody from someplace and put them in a replacement, and then when they need a machine gunner, you go with somebody.
Right.
So I never could. Like here it says, no, it's not company C, it's company D. When they finally found them. And they didn't find them until September.
So this letter,
Like down here, it's
like
September.
6 months, 5 months later.
Yeah,
Right.
that went before it found with this group.
Which is really actually your biggest clues.
Oh, yeah.
Other than him saying it
Okay.
was the day after.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing is I called 82nd Airborne and I told them kind of about my father and D-Day, and they were really, really nice to me. And then they asked, "Well, when did your dad arrive in Europe?" And I knew it was kind of late. They said June 2nd. I said, "It's not possible. He couldn't be on the beaches by June 7th. It takes too long to process them. Like he was in Wales, they processed them. Thousands of guys processed, put them on a train, and they tried to get them down as fast as they could because my dad said the lights were on and they never did that. Got them down to southern England, but you process again and you put them on ships, and then you process again and put them on,
Amphibious.
and it was like, it's not possible. And I said, "You don't know my dad, he wouldn't make it up." And then they wouldn't answer my phone calls.
But he can't be the only one who was separated from the unity train with, got put in a replacement unit, right? Right. There's got to be somewhere. There's got to be some other stories that are similar.
Right. I'm never found them.
I know.
Yeah.
I feel like there's another mission.
There's another one. Please.
Go ahead.
Like we had special skills and they didn't want to document who they were pulling. We need you, and you.
Yes, and you know what else? Just a second. I think all those ships that went over, they destroyed all those records of who was on what ship, because I was curious how many people on my dad's ship would have been injured right away or died.
Right. So, and if you had those names, then you would have all those other people you could confirm with families or whatever. Yeah.
I did have a secret, something marked secret. Things kind of, and I forget, there was one man that got that to send it to me. I think it was
It's really interesting.
but I can't.
So I'm wondering,
in the book.
I mean, we'll never know that for sure, but like, you really wonder if all those records hadn't burned in St. Louis,
Right.
what would those have really shown?
Right.
And would they have shown this interesting pattern of, people not being where everybody expected them to be?
And then the thing with 82nd Airborne, I always pictured it like Home Alone, the Christmas movie, where the mother's all upset and calling social services, and they pick up, they go crazy on line 2. And that's how I picture them. But I think because they thought it was impossible, and I think they were saying, don't answer because she doesn't get it. We can't spend time on that. She doesn't understand what she's saying.
Right.
But then what I did is I got Alfred Simon's discharge papers from Marge Simon.
Who was with your dad,
Albert-
would have been
Albert-
through
it
in
was
those
her
those
uncle.
early
It
days.
was her uncle, and I found somebody in Madison, and the Wisconsin Veterans Museum said, yeah, we wouldn't have given you those records, but I found a weak link. Actually, I think of that historicist, so I can give you her name, but I won't do it. And I said, I wrote a letter to my cousin Marge, and I said, okay, please do this right away. Address it to blank at this place, this address, say who you are, say you're related to him. Because you're not supposed to give it to anyone other than wives or children. But he never married, never had kids. And I'm like,
So you're not, yeah.
my niece is good. That was my thing.
And then she got,
About 3 months later, she sent them to me. They left on May 21st. They were at the same time leaving. They both landed June 2nd. But on his awards, or whatever, there's a certain section, he had a bronze arrowhead. And the bronze arrowhead means he did an assault landing. He was there on D-Day itself, 6:30 a.m., 116 of the 29th Division. He did die by suicide in 67. He was a sweet man. I wish I'd asked him about him too.
and they traveled to England together on the same ship. So it is,
So what I proved to Fort Bragg,
yes. Is
my
it,
dad had 24 more hours to do exactly what he said he did. And I always thought,
right.
civilian female approved Fort Bragg wrong.
I don't think they like that.
That's one of my dad's friends. He was tough to find. And his daughter thought his nickname was Spot because he peeled a lot of potatoes. And then she found a letter from my dad in her garage, and she goes, "I guess you were right." I was right. Yes, we had. Yeah, my dad lost that, and we wanted to find him, but I did find his daughter. And it's hard to do some of that.
Oh, it's so much work, right?
I found it because there was a picture of his gravestone online, and it was a new gravestone to me. And the library in the county of where the gravestone is keeps microfiche records of the obituary, and that's how I found his stuff. And I found his grandson. Because it was kind of a smaller town, maybe. And Stead was North Carolina, but with all that information, I found his daughter with a different name in South Carolina.
Do you ever stop doing this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have.
You're okay.
I have been okay with not knowing about the assessment. I finally just said, I don't think I can know.
You can be a history professor now.
Yeah, for sure.
One day.
But I mean,
Yeah.
and so did you ever, so they wouldn't answer the phone anymore for that?
I
Like,
did
you
let
ever-
them know.
I did say circle back and say someone that you know that
Yeah,
you're,
I think I sent some records and I said, I found this, and here's his record. And look, when, I probably said, he landed with my dad on June 2nd and he has a run to.
right,
And my dad did not have it.
right. And that was only for D-Day.
Yeah,
Sort of.
he maybe should have had one, but Alfred Simon landed on D-Day with 116, and he stayed with them for the rest of the war. So I
So
think
then
the
there was
records
a-
are
it was
better.
much more linear.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a better record of it. Whereas my dad switched groups and.
Right. So that made
It
it
was
very,
kind of
very,
lost.
well, very confusing though to try to find the
Right.
the pathway through. Are there any other ones that you want to have us look at? No, that envelope is impressive. That's really
That might
helpful.
be, because it is,
Are there more questions?
Also, if anyone wants to leave, you may leave. It's okay with me. How long was your dad in the person? 5.5. From 2002 till July of 2007.
This is actual.
Oh, yes, I have 2 daughters, they're both creative. One did the cover and one did my website.
And this is his signature?
Yes,
And I
yeah,
don't
on my medical
think it's
paper.
special that it's at the top of every page.
And this was the picture. And so there were things on that picture. Maybe go to this first one. So we enlarged this with 1,200 pixels or whatever, and then everything was happening kind of fast. So there were certain things I didn't notice at first. He's wearing his wedding ring, which I doubt if he had been wearing, but he never thought he was going to make it through. I also thought I'd asked him what was the worst part of the war, and he said Bastogne. And this is after Bastogne, and I was wondering why he looked so comfortable, relaxed, kind of confident. But somebody in one of my talks said that his uncle had written to his mom after the Battle of the Bulge, and there was a celebratory note tone in the letter. And it was kind of like, we won that battle, it's just a matter of time. And I think that's what he was thinking. I'm going to get to see my wife again. I'm going to meet my 4.5-month-old daughter. He never leaves. He said at the beginning of all of this, said some guys kept track of the cities we've been in. I never did that because I never taught. I lived through it. So he never thought, but after the Battle of the Bulge, the other thing is he's dressed differently.
Yeah.
And I think he is translating for German prisoners.
Oh, that would make sense at that point, wouldn't
Yes.
it? Yes.
And he never wanted to admit that at the beginning because he thought they would send him in as a spy kind of person. Because he could fake it, but it's like,
Oh.
I want to go.
That's
Another thing I wondered, is that a real shadow?
Yes.
It almost looks like it's an old man shadow.
Right there.
Yeah.
It looks just like him later in life. And it is coming from
It
that
is interesting.
face. It's coming from that face.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
like
think of
this
him,
is who he was, this is who he is.
it's real. It's a real shadow. But I picture him like in the wheelchair and I'm looking at him like this. And that's real. But the other thing is, he was actually hanging onto a line, some kind of like a wire.
Oh, you can see it in the smaller picture you got there, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And my daughter got rid of that, and then we put his arm up to the binding of the books and then the logical.
It's good. It's all the rule of thirds thing. Like it's like
That's what else. Another thing, he has got new boots on, and he should have had those for the Battle of the Bulge.
yeah, that would have been nice, huh?
They didn't get them to them until after, because they were giving priority to gasoline, and there was a motto or a slogan, finish the war in 44, but that didn't happen. The Battle of the Bulge started in December. It was 10 to 20 degrees below, and they did not have boots.
I can't.
Not damn boots. I don't think any boots. They might have had just marching boots. And some people just died because it was so cold. Also, he was sleeping in 8 to 10 inches of snow, and there was artillery flying overhead, and they were sleeping in foxholes. So that doesn't sound good, but they were like, this is great, because the artillery was not going for them, it was going for them, and they knew they weren't the target. And 8 to 10 inches isn't that bad if it's not 10, 20, 0. You know, it might have been 30, 25, that wasn't a problem. And then the foxholes were a good deal because they were German built. And the Germans had more time to build them, and they could sleep 2 guys lying down. And the American, they had to build them too often, too fast. One sitting up, maybe one lying down. I'm not really certain, but the German built foxholes were better. Just more time waiting for us to go, I suppose.
You're telling about the fraudman in here.
Yeah, that was weird.
So did your dad only say that one sentence about
Yes.
fraudman? What was it again?
Well, okay. And had he, well, by the time I figured it out, he passed away. There was a little too much of that happening. But he told my sister in Colorado, And then they would feed me things, because sometimes things were only said once. So my oldest sister was born, well, she was there. She said, yeah, Dad, she sent it to me in an email. Dad said, I think the swimmers didn't know the war was over or didn't want to believe it. And I was like, I put it to the side. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? But I kept it, and then I was reading Orville Faubus's book on the 320th. And if it doesn't make sense to you, you just kind of go over it, and one time I see it and I go, oh, that's what it was. And Hitler had sent frogmen, like all dressed in black, swims, whatever,
Like a wetsuit?
skin diver
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And they were supposed to blow up some bridges, but the current was too fast and the water was too cold, and they lost the charges. So it was supposed to blow it up, and then they had to get out, and they were captured by the square. And I was like, at first I thought, okay, Dad heard about it, or he saw it, but I then interpreted it for them.
Right.
And that would have been a great story to ask. But I bet that's what it was. But it took me after he's passed away before I could make sense out of it. That the swimmers either didn't believe it or didn't know the war was over or didn't want to believe it. As it happened in April. And the papers were signed May 8th, but it was decided before that. Then they just had to get the presidents together.
So we have
Any other questions?
No? Awesome. Thank you.